Hello and welcome to Enable the Fastest Response to Ransomware with Veeam Data Platform. Today's webinar is sponsored by Veeam and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech Media and I'm excited to be your moderator for this special event. Now, before we get to today's great content, we do have a few housekeeping items that will help you get the most out of this session. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in our webinar control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that you ask. A Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues that you might be experiencing. A browser refresh is going to fix most audio or video or slide advancement issues, but if that doesn't work, just let us know in the Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. Now, second, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources. I'd especially like to call your attention to a raft of resources from Veeam. There are links for why rapid recovery is safer than paying the ransom, a ransomware prevention kit, 6 capabilities you need for rapid recovery, and overcoming ransomware with a single solution. Then we have some PDFs, the Cloud Protection Trends Report for 2023 and Hybrid Cloud Backup for Dummies. Finally, there's also a customer success reference guide. So take advantage of all those great resources. They'll be here in the handout section for the full hour, but people often forget about them and then the event is closing and it's too late, so grab them now. Now, at the end of this webinar, we will be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prize. Official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section. Just scroll to the bottom and you'll find the prize terms and conditions link there. Now, finally, one of the best benefits of this event is the opportunity to ask a question of our expert presenters. So to help encourage those questions, we have another Amazon gift card, this one for $50 for the best question. So after the event is over, we'll look back through all the questions that came in, pick out the very best one, and contact that prize winner. So with that, let's get to today's fantastic content. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our presenters today. We have Chris Hoff, who's Security Marketing Manager for Veeam, and Jim Carter, a Senior Systems Engineer at Veeam. Chris and Jim, welcome.
Great to be here, Scott. Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, thanks for being here. And Chris, I'll turn things over to you to take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. So let that slide load. So it's probably not surprising to hear that according to our research, about 85% of organizations had some form of ransomware incident last year. Usually the response when I throw that statistic out is that they're surprised it's not 100% because we're all being attacked and we know that. That's nothing new. What is interesting though is that of those who paid the ransom, 33% or about a third didn't actually get their data back. So we're talking about criminals after all, but they paid money and they didn't get what they expected. Most concerning, and the statistic that I want to highlight, is that 19% of organizations were able to actually recover from an incident without paying the ransom. And some people would say that that's not bad odds, right? It's 1 in 5. It's better than playing the lottery. But when you're talking about the data within your organization, it's probably not something that you want to take those kind of risks with. Here at Veeam, our goal is to raise that number, raise that 19%. And I like to say that backup is easy, and it's the recovery piece that's actually hard. And so we're going to talk about some best practices today on how to make sure that you can actually recover your data in the event of an incident. Now, the first and probably most boring non-technical reason why organizations are losing data is that their backup systems aren't designed to recover all of the data that gets affected. And if you think about it, it makes sense because way back pre-ransomware, ransomware in its modern form is hitting its 10-year 10-year anniversary this year. Back in the days before ransomware, you had an average of 3 to 5% of your data that was being restored. And that was usually things like, I deleted a file accidentally or my hard drive crashed, that type of thing. In the world of ransomware, we've upped that number to close to 100% of your data being impacted. And these legacy systems just simply aren't designed to recover that amount of data in a rapid kind of way, right? An effective kind of way. And so, Jim, when we talk about recovery, we also tend to talk about the options that you have for recovery. Can we start off and talk about some of the options that we have to enable recovery?
Yeah, sure. So, Veeam is from version 1 has always provided you with options. That's one of our biggest reasons for purchasing is it gives you multiple tools in your tool belt to be able to restore data, to protect data. But like Chris was saying, traditional backups in the old days, not necessarily what everybody's doing anymore, but we certainly offer that. One of the early differentiators that I remember back a long time ago was giving you the ability to replicate your data to different locations. That helped you with being able to fail over more quickly, to have a fully hydrated virtual machine ready to go. And that again was back in version 1. Over the years, we have added more platforms to be able to recover from. More recently, with integrating with storage solutions that you possibly already have in place. Today, that storage vendors have their own mechanisms for, I wouldn't say backing up data, but basically replicating their data to some other location. Well, we can tie into that, be able to let you use what you've already invested in, but it helps you take more non-invasive type backups by using the storage on the back end. So, we've had that available for many years now as well. And then more recently, giving you the ability to have continuous data protection for workloads that you absolutely have to have RTOs and RPOs in the seconds, as well as giving you the ability to to protect that workload without stunning the virtual machines. A lot of larger workloads that suffers from. We give the ability to protect it outside of the hypervisor and at the host level, and again, giving that fully hydrated virtual machine on the other side ready to fail over at a moment's notice. So again, yes, all of those, reducing the risk for you, saving time for you as an admin, and most importantly, restoring your confidence. So, Chris, what I'd like to do is kind of go over a high-level architecture of Veeam to the audience that is familiar with Veeam. This is going to make sense to you. This is a bit of an eye chart here, so just follow with me. Basically, from the left to right, you've got your production, your main data center, I guess you could say. On the right-hand side, you have your secondary data center, hopefully. Or another location, like co-location, something else that you can recover to, that you can run workloads from. And then up at the top, you have object storage. So think of that about basically like the cloud. You could have that as on-prem as well, but we're just going to pretend that's a cloud up there at the top. So from the left-hand side, you have your hypervisor, say your vSphere environment. You have your storage system at the bottom of that you're tied into with Veeam, that you're backing up virtual machines, physical machines, file shares, all of that to the to the storage system down at the bottom. As far as other components that you would need from us, other than a virtual machine that has Veeam on it, is a backup proxy. You see that listed there as well. That is a service that is your worker bee. I used to always call it. It's going to do the work. It's going to do the data moving. It's the compression mechanism, deduplication. Unless you're writing to a dedupe appliance, then we back off and say, let that handle that. It handles encryption, so it's just doing all the work, and that can also be the same server if you want. You can scale that out if you need to. You need more of those worker bees out there, and then you're backing up the data to a repository. That's the third part. So you have a console, you have the backup proxy of the repository. All of that can be in one. If you need to have an all-in-one appliance type model, we can provide that. You can also decouple those components if it makes sense for you from a security standpoint, if it makes sense to you from a performance standpoint, then that again gives you those options to be able to do that. So you've got the repository that you're writing data to, and then you can send that backup data to the other side, the secondary data center, up to object storage if you'd like to get it off site. Many people, I'm sure pretty much everybody in the world has heard of the 3-2-1 model these days. This would facilitate that. Let's see, I believe that my next slide is going to show you storage integration and what it looks like from Veeam's perspective, how to recover using those built-in storage snapshots. So you can see the example here. We have Pure storage in the screenshot. So you're letting Pure do its job, or if it's another storage appliance that's doing its job, taking the snapshots. But you can see here that from Veeam you can manage those snapshots from a recovery standpoint directly from within the console. So you can see here, you right-click on a snapshot that you're going back to. It gives you the ability to recover instantly from that snapshot. You can recover the entire virtual machine. You can recover individual disks, guest files, like a traditional restore would be, and you can even do application level if the application is present on that snapshot, like say Active Directory, Exchange, anything that's application aware, and then you can recover individual items at that point directly from the snapshot. So instead of having to recover the entire snapshot and finding something from a point in time, you can get much more granular with Veeam.
And it's that granularity that's really going to help us recover, right?
That's right.
I'm pulling up the notes on this just to make sure that I get it right. But it's amazing to me the number of stories that we hear, both talking with customers and even talking with our internal I call them the ransomware SWAT team, about various incidents that customers have had with ransomware. And there's one customer in particular that they got hit by ransomware. The attack took out a significant amount of their actual backup infrastructure. Right, it actually deleted their backups, which we're seeing more and more these days. As a matter of fact, last year we had a statistic in our ransomware research report that said that 68% of attacks included some kind of attempt at compromising the backup infrastructure, which is crazy, and actually goes to the need for things like immutability and following the 3-2-1 rule. But Jim, you're more familiar with this than I am. Take us through how they were able to use Veeam to get back into production.
Right. So in this particular field case study, again, a bad actor, one of the first things they're going to do once they infiltrate your environment is make it to where you can't recover once they're found out. Like once either they make themselves, they expose themselves to you and say, "Here I am. I now have you. I've got your data. I've encrypted your data. First thing they're going to do is try to remove that mechanism for you to recover from, because then if you've got that, you don't need to pay a ransom. You don't need to get that data back from them. You've got it yourself. So they're going to look for the industry-leading backup solutions in place. They're going to look for all the the Veeams of the world, the other competitors to Veeam, and they're going to try to make sure you can't recover from that. If you are one of those that, if you're a Veeam customer and you haven't locked down your backups or put them in a location that cannot be altered or in an immutable location, we're just going to say this is a worst case scenario, I guess is what I'm going to say. This is a case where you've used Veeam and you're backing up to Veeam, but you've done nothing else to protect Veeam at all, or to secure that environment. And so the bad actor comes in, they see it, they go, oh, they're using Veeam. Oh, I can delete it? Ha, I gotcha. So they delete all the backups. They encrypt your Veeam server, or they delete your Veeam server altogether, your backend Veeam database that has all the job information, and they feel like they have you, that you have no other way to protect yourself or to get back up to where you don't need them. So what you could do in this case, hopefully you do have them in a location that is immutable. But let's just say in this case, they've deleted all the on-prem backups and they've deleted your Veeam server. All you have to do to recover in that scenario is either from a secondary location, even from the primary location, or from a cloud location, is to spin up a Veeam server. It's a free download. You can even do it from your laptop. You can grab the community edition. As long as you have access to those backups that are hopefully in a different location, that were locked down, unable to be encrypted, unable to be deleted, you just rescan that repository. Veeam's going to see it. There was nothing tied to it from the old Veeam server that there's no metadata or anything like that says it had to be the same backup server that gives you the ability to restore from. Nothing like that. Again, this is a clean Veeam install. You rescan the repository, you bring in those backups, you start recovering. And so I hope I'm making sense there. I'm kind of rambling. And then as you're restoring, Veeam's going to give you the ability to scan those as it's restoring for additional malware. So if it finds it, it's going to stop and say, whoa, you may want to go back to a different point in time, back when it was cleaner. So in other words, you're not reintroducing that malware back into your environment. I hope I made sense.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And the beauty of this for this customer was that they were, I call it data mobility, right? And it's one of those things that I think we tend to take for granted because it's so obvious. And the fact that they were able to spin up a brand new Veeam server in Azure and basically rebuild their environment in Azure is strangely, I don't want to say it's unique to Veeam, but it's something that not many others can do. And the bad guys know it. As a matter of fact, I was texting a couple months back. I was texting with a friend of mine who's a malware researcher, and I asked him about it. When what's happening, or how are the bad actors going after the backup environment? And what he said was they're just deleting the database that the server uses. They can leave everything else in place, and because that database is gone, so are your backups. Even if the backup, the repository is right there. So it's pretty scary, but it's a good thing that they had the Azure environment, right? They my good friend Jason Buffington calls it cloudy hardware, and they could just bring everything back and come back online quickly. And
right.
In this case, time is truly money. So let's push forward a little bit here.
And actually, while you're doing that, Chris, there was actually a question I just saw from another Chris that says, and I think this is pertinent to our conversation. It says, should the response to a ransomware attack be consistent across the industry? We're kind of, answering off this or off the cuff here, I guess you could say. But I would say the response, I don't know if it'll ever be consistent across the industry. I think it's your response. I think every ransomware attack you need to have a response that you need to have a ready to go response for all the different things, like say, if your data is deleted, if your data is encrypted, if your data is stolen and then used against you for ransom. So in other words, if you're used as an extortion type thing, we've heard so many stories of things like that. So I don't know if, and it's always evolving. So I don't know if there'll ever be a consistent response, unless I'm not, maybe I'm misunderstanding. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, there's definitely best practices, right? CISA has a number of best practices that you should absolutely be following. NIST,
True.
right? All of those documents. FBI has a number of documents that are actually based off CISA. So, but the key, and this kind of goes to the other question that's in there about testing the DR process, is making sure that the process is comprehensive to your needs, and not ending up having somebody say, I think it should work like this, or I think it should work like that. Being able to, everybody knows their role. You've tested the plan.
No, you're exactly right. I would add to that I came from a very large, Fortune 80 company that, we had tons of security, but it also, sometimes security got in the way of production work. And so I'm tying that in that, a lot of times now at Veeam gets a bad rap sometimes for seeming to be not secure out of the box, not secure enough, that we don't have a all-in-one appliance that is impenetrable and can't be hacked and all of those things. And I would say the response to that would be that there are best practices. Back to your point, Chris, there are best practices. And if you we have a best practice website there are a ton of things that you can do from a hardening perspective that you should be looking at. We're just not going to force that on you because it may not work with your security standards. In other words, if we say you've got to be doing X, Y, and Z, here's your box, put it on the floor, and nobody can ever get into it. That's just it's not realistic. So your security team's not going to like it. So you take what we've got and you harden it to your standards. Does that make sense?
It totally does. It totally does. So there's a bunch of questions coming in, and this is awesome. We're gonna get to your questions as we go through. We'll hopefully leave some time at the end. But Jim, take us through one of the things that you mentioned was about being able to be prescriptive about restoring files, and so take us through what that looks like from our perspective.
Yeah, sure. So what you're looking at here is, again, one of our explorers. This is just looking at all files from within the backup of, say, this is looking at your E drive. Now, in the past, traditional file level restores, you would pick a point in time, you would mount up the backup file, and you would, pick and choose what you wanted to restore and just hope that was the right one, the right file that you needed. So in version 12, this is brand new in version 12, that we're going to show you just what's changed. So people have been asking us to provide this for a long time. I'm very happy that they finally did, so that, again, this is going to help you differentiate between, you're just going to grab everything on the E drive and recover it back to a point in time, or do you just want the things that have been changed? Do you want the things because those things have changed, very, very possibly could have been hit by ransomware. They could have been touched. The beginnings of the encryption process And now you, instead of having to recover everything, you can just recover what has been modified. So this is just showing you that example.
And that explore that also includes things like the Explorer for Active Directory too, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And this is one of my favorite ones because, you know, if you're an AD admin, or if you have access to, say, users and computers view within your Active Directory domain, let's say you've made some changes. Maybe you even have some scripts that go out and make wholesale changes. And let's just say, you know, you accidentally messed up, or somebody did on the operations side, whatever. You know, hopefully you have a way to go back and figure out how to recover that. Well, this shows you how simple it is to load up an Explorer that's looking at the backup file, or a replication if you're replicating. Not that you would want to replicate an AD server, but if you were, you could use it on that too. And this shows you, again, comparing with production and only showing you what has been changed on all the different attributes within, let's say, an OU, a user object, a computer object, and being able to recover, again, just what was changed, as opposed to having to recover the entire thing. So I really, really like this Explorer in particular.
Yeah, because AD can be troublesome if you start deleting things accidentally.
Yeah, and that's one of those things too, that unless you are a super paranoid AD admin, you know, you just don't like to mess with a lot of stuff. And so if you know, having something to be able to go back to and recover from mistakes is huge. All right,
Absolutely.
so yeah, this next slide, I think I was going to speak to this one as well.
Yep.
Instant recovery at scale. Basically, again, kind of an eye chart here. Direct your attention, looking left to right. Basically, if you look at these are the types of things that we're going to protect. So virtual machines, whether it be, you know, Linux, Microsoft, and then you've got the physical servers with agents that we can protect. Cloud servers, cloud instances that we protect. AWS, Google, Azure, and then also file shares. So, you know, we can protect a file server, or you can protect file shares differently if you'd like. Gives you a little more granularity. All of those things you see kind of moving to the right are being absorbed into a VBR repository. So what I want to point out, and this kind of gets back to what you mentioned before about the portability, Chris, is that all of our backups are put into a VBK file. It's compressed, deduplicated. You see it listed there as that first block there. That file is fully what's the word? It's got everything you need in it to help you recover. That's what I was saying before. It doesn't have anything tied to a specific Veeam server or a specific Veeam proxy, a specific Veeam database, pointer, none of that. Everything is comprised for your backups in that file. So as long as you have access to it physically within the network, as long as it's protected, offsite, air-gapped, which we'll get into here in a little bit, immutable, such as object, at the block level, that type of thing. As long as it's protected, you've got everything you need in there. The way I kind of like to compare it is like the WinZip file of the old Windows days. Well, even now, even today, we still have, you know, zipped up compressed files. Think of it the same way. Think if you have a zipped up file on a drive somewhere. Well, how do I uncompress that and get it out? Just get, you know, WinZip. It's the same kind of concept with Veeam. And then continuing to move over, you see that you've got different types of recoveries, instant multi-VM recovery, all of these things being brought up from that VBK file directly, as opposed to having to restore that BBK file back into your production environment, you can actually instantly recover everything you see there. Virtual machines, disks, databases, your NAS information. You can bring it up directly from the backup file, start using it. That's what we call instant recovery at scale.
And Veeam actually pioneered instant recovery. I just found out that it's 13 years ago that
That's right.
pioneered this idea of instant recovery.
That's exactly right.
So happy birthday to that feature.
Yeah, and I would say think about if you have a multi-terabyte huge database server, that instead of having to recover all that data back before you can even start using it, you could just power it on directly from the backup file, figure out what happened, all that. So that's where that comes into play.
Absolutely, and of course, my favorite topic is around alerting. I don't believe that you can have enough visibility no matter what you do. And there's a bunch of questions coming into the Q&A, which we will get to about malware detection. And yes, we can scan for malware in your backups. But the other thing that's interesting and important to know is that the bad actors are going in if they can get access to your backup server. There's been a number of instances where the bad actor, when they're living off the land, are changing the backup jobs themselves so that the job runs, right? If you're just using something like the job logs done to check to see if the job was successful, the job's going to be successful. The only time that you find out that the data is missing is when you try to restore it. And so they're backing up, garbage files, temp files, what have you, so that the job works. It's the same amount of data. It looks like it's legitimately working, but there's nothing there. So understanding who's making changes, understanding what changes were made, all of those kind of innocuous things are key. And to bring up a question that was asked earlier, yes, they can be pushed out into your ticketing system. As a matter of fact, if you're using the Splunk automation and orchestration tool, which used to be called Phantom Cyber, you can actually add that to your runbook so that alert can maybe kick off a ticket or kick off some kind of an investigation. Because even today, with all the advancements in malware scanning, it's still true that most incidents start off with somebody saying, "Hey, my laptop's acting funny." And of course, we have things like the possible ransomware activity alarm, where we can track data size and things like that, so that you can actually see when those changes are happening, and you can see also who's changing those jobs, right? Is the backup job, is the size of the job changing, that type of thing, right? Is there suspicious activity going on? And this is going to be huge, because we are long past the days in the malware world of being able to say that yes, it is this specific type of virus, right, or a piece of malware. They just don't have names anymore. We judged malware by the hacker group that is producing it. So if you remember, the days of like Code Red, I'm showing my age, Code Red or Configure, which is surprisingly still kicking around. We're not there anymore, and it's a piece of malware from the Conti group, that type of thing. Now, one of the other things that was actually asked was about how often should we test our backups, and the answer, in my opinion, is monthly. The unfortunate reality, there was a study done by IDC, and they said that on average organizations are are testing their backups on an annual basis. And the reason that's always given is that it's too long, it's too hard. They don't, it's a manual process. They don't have the hardware to recover the data outside of production, that type of thing. And that's problematic because things are moving very quickly these days. And so we need to make sure that we can actually automate that testing process. And so when we're talking about that, you'll hear us talk about things like secure restore. And so that's where, and I'm just going to build this slide out. That's where we're actually taking the backup repository, where we're actually mounting it like a disk, and we're doing some kind of a malware check. So I know there's a couple questions in here about malware checking. We use integrations with the leading tools that are already in your environment, so that you can do that. You can do that, antivirus scan, and then choose what data you're going to recover. As a matter of fact, there was a question in the chat about, can you separate out the infected files from the non-infected files? And the answer is absolutely yes. And it's using that functionality that Jim was talking about, with being able to select the files that you want to recover and not having to just do a blanket restore. Now, the reason that we're doing it like this is quite simply because in the malware world, which is the world that I came out of, there is no consistency in naming, as I said. So if you're using some other product, right, you then have to manually correlate everything together. And that takes time, and that slows down the recovery process. And so by using the tools that you already have in place, you're consolidating things. You're making your life just a little bit easier so that you can move faster. And so when we find that infection, we can disable it. And by the way, this is all happening in an isolated sandboxed environment. So there's actually other things that you can do. You can actually talk to customers who are using what we call it data labs to test their patches. So if you're worried about software supply chain issues, which you probably should be, you can test your patches without having to have a full secondary infrastructure in a lab. And you can kick off that restore process. That's what happens when I get too click happy. You can stop the restore process if you need to. As a matter of fact, if you're working with an incident response team, they can use data labs to do part of their investigation and find out where not just patient 0 is, but also the date and sometimes time of the infection and the attack. So it's hugely valuable outside of just making sure that your data is available and can be restored and restored cleanly. Now, the other thing, the way that we're doing this, and this is a feature within Veeam Disaster Recovery Orchestrator, or Veeam Recovery Orchestrator, is what we call Clean DR. And this is just an automated process that is scanning for malware in the environment. So you set it up, you move on with your day to that list of projects that you probably have on a whiteboard someplace, and let the system run. Now, there was something else that I was going to mention about Clean DR, and it's totally skipped my mind. Oh, that was what it was. Train came back into the station. With the Disaster Recovery Orchestrator, it also allows you to build out your recovery documentation, which I'm a huge fan of because I hate documentation. I'm just like probably everybody else. So you can actually build out your recovery plans that you're using as a baseline for testing. And so now you've not only got your plan, you've tested your plan, and you've documented your plan. And so now we can remove all of those questions about how it should work and what should happen. And as a matter of fact, if you're a backup person and you've been brought into the security team's tabletop exercises, red team, blue team type exercises, there's a dashboard in Recovery Orchestrator that will quite literally tell you if you can meet your RPOs and your RTOs and if the data is secure. And so now when the security team is doing their tabletop exercises, you can, and they say, hey, Chris, can you recover this data? You can say yes, and here's my proof. And so you don't have, save yourself a little bit of work in those situations. Now, I just talked through all of that without going through the slide. I get excited about malware. It is the world that I came out of. Now, one of the things that was also asked in the chat is, do we have a way to protect the backup repositories? And the answer is absolutely yes. You can make sure, and you should make sure that the repositories are encrypted, and you can store them in immutable storage. But immutability does not equal hardened, and it does not equal air gapped. What we want to make sure that we're doing is adding these together, and Jim mentioned it as well with a 3-2-1 rule. We want to make sure that we've got the immutable storage at every layer of your storage system, whether it's your primary storage, your secondary storage site, right? That second copy of data, or even out in your archives. And we want to make sure that one of those copies is air gapped, right? And tape is still popular in the world. Our data protection report said that 21% of organizations are still using tape, which is fantastic. There's nothing more air gapped than pulling the cartridge out of the drive. But all of this together is what's going to help protect those backups. And that's exactly what's going to make that data secure. Now, one thing to know about the way that we do immutability is, as Jim mentioned, we don't have an appliance that we're necessarily selling you. We're using your own storage. And the reason that that's important is partly from a cost perspective, obviously, but there's a lot of organizations out there that have openly said that they've had to make choices about what they put into an immutable repository versus not, because they just don't have the money for buying the box. And so by being able to use your existing storage, we're able to grow with the storage needs as you guys grow. And that includes things like going direct to object. We added that in V12, which is fantastic because it kind of takes a little bit of work out of the process of moving to immutable storage, and it means that we know where our backups are, we know that they're protected, and we know that all of the data is protected, as opposed to having to make those trade-offs. Now, did I cover that, Jim? Did I do a good job at talking about immutability? What did I miss?
No, I think so. I mean, it's again, we do integrate with block level immutability solutions such as AWS S3. In version 12 now, we've been able to tie into excuse me, Azure Blob, that Microsoft provide that ability to take it from the block level and not the container level. So now we tie in with that. Other storage S3 compatible vendors also provide that. We can write to that. So Yeah, and back to your point, now we can go straight there. Now this slide's going to show you really how it was prior to version 12. You can still do it today as well. It's going to give you more flexibility to do it the way you're looking at it here. Basically, at the top, you see the scale out backup repository. What a scale out backup repository is, in the past, Veeam provides you the ability to combine logical types of storage devices into what we call an extent, or different extents into one storage location. So think of it like you have a dedupe appliance plus you had some local disk. You could combine that together. And so we give you the ability to scale out in that way. That's what you see there under the performance tier. The performance tier, you've got direct attack storage, you've got dedupe appliances, S3 compatible, you've got hardened repositories, which would be a Linux server in front of some disk that we give you the instructions on how to make that quote unquote hardened. So that's immutable directly on-prem if you need that. Now we can scale that out if you move again to the left to the right to what we call the capacity tier. That's going to give you, let's say the performance tier is going to be those local backups that you need for quick recoveries. Yes, we now can give you the ability to go straight to the cloud, but is that going to be the fastest recovery? Probably not. Not now. Not with physics involved. You want to have the fastest recoveries on the performance tier, whatever that may be. The capacity tier is where you're gonna scale out backups to, like your archived data, places that are cheaper, and maybe not necessarily as fast. So think of like AWS S3, that's immutable, the Google Cloud Platform, Azure Blob. That's that capacity tier. That's stuff that maybe is 30 days old, and you want to push it off over there, and it's protected, but it's not necessarily stuff that you got to get back immediately, really quick. And then continuing on left to right is the archive tier, which lets you push even older data to dirt cheap storage, tiering, like say Glacier within Amazon S3, Azure Blob Archive. Those are just two examples. All of that together is a scale out repository, we're calling it. So it's just one repository scaled out. You don't have to set immutability from the beginning to the end of the life cycle of that data.
Awesome. So there's a ton of questions that are coming in, and so what I'm going to do is we're going to jump over to those. And so,
there were a lot of questions.
Quickly. So there's a question in here. Knowing that immutability is supported, what is the assurance that threat actors can't assume an administrator role to change these files? That's a good question, and it actually, strangely enough, has very little to do with Veeam. The first thing that you should do, Veeam has some best practices about not including the Veeam server as part of your domain, etc. But the vast majority of ransomware attacks, if you look at the postmortems from the past 10 years, a bad password was part of the attack, right? And when I say bad password, I mean not complex password, but I also mean a password that was reused. So if you're using the same password for multiple logins, that's a problem. If you're not turning on MFA, which we've now added in version 12, which was released last month, that's going to be a problem. So complex passwords, two-factor authentication are not a silver bullet, but it's going to significantly lessen your exposure. And frankly, using some kind of secure password manager, making sure that it's easy for your users and for yourself to have different passwords for all of your applications, making sure that login is easy. Those are the types of things that are going to make sure that the bad actor isn't going to get into, in this case, your Veeam server. There's another question in here about and I don't know the answer to this one, Jim. Can Veeam guarantee the complete destruction of deleted data for regulatory compliance?
Now, I was looking at that. I'm assuming they're asking more about like ransomware insurance, maybe, which we do have in this newest version. We are offering, but there are some, just like with all vendors, there are a lot of things that have to come into play there that will assure that if things were completely destroyed, that we would be liable for that. But you think that's what they're asking there, Chris? Or
I think they're going the other direction. If we can destroy the data in the backups, and I think the answer is yes. But we might need to ask somebody about that.
I think I know it. I think I know what that is. Like basically, if you've destroyed data, if you've deleted things, you've got to make sure they're not restored. And yes, we do have the ability to do that within our regulatory compliance. Yes.
Let's see. There's another question in here about how does Veeam monitor continuously for threats. There's a lot of folks out there that are conflating threat hunting and disaster recovery. We are not a threat hunting company, and frankly, some of the companies that claim they are not. But we rely on I'll say the professionals, the people who are investing millions of dollars in their detection capabilities and their response capabilities. And we integrate, as we mentioned before, with those technologies to search for threats, which actually goes into another question that's in here about, in the case of a ransomware attack, how does Veeam ensure rewinding to a previous snapshot that also doesn't contain a ransomware exploit? That's where we're using those automated tools to scan for malware. So that's part of the platform, and part of the way that the feature called Data Labs, or what the feature called Data Labs is used for. Can compromised data backed up be air gapped? Yeah, absolutely. Sure, you can back up anything. If you're compromised and your backups are still running, yep, you're going to back up that threat too. But here's the thing, and it kind of goes to the theme of these questions. If your backup system is the thing that's detecting the attack, you've got a bigger problem on the front end. And I'm just completely blunt about it. That if you're still using, I'll call it old school signature-based malware detection. If you're not using EDR, endpoint detection and response tools, or some of them call themselves next generation AV, you're opening up yourself to being owned very easily. And so, like everything in life, there are no guarantees, but it's all about reducing your attack surface and making sure that those tools on the front end that are designed for detection and response are working and working well, is going to take you a long way moving forward. And unfortunately,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
No, so I was going to say, unfortunately, the challenge is that those tools do fail, right? Even if you're catching 99% of malware, there's a million pieces of malware being seen every day. That's still 10,000 pieces of malware you're missing. Companies are choosing to pay the ransom because even if they still have their backups, it's too slow to recover. And Don't have to go much farther than Colonial Pipeline here on the East Coast to see that. They had all of their backups basically intact, but it was going to take them so long to recover. They decided it was a better business decision. I hate to say it like that, but it was a better business decision to pay the ransom. So there's a number of questions. We're coming up to the top of the hour, and I want to be respectful of all of your time. So what we're going to do is we're gonna stop here. We'll get these questions and we'll get them answered, absolutely. But I want to thank everybody for being with us today. Hopefully this was valuable. If there's anything that we can answer after the fact, absolutely reach out to us. We can point you in the right direction. So with that, Jim, thanks for doing this with me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
and Scott, I'll hand it back over to you.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, gentlemen. Excellent presentation. Really appreciate you getting through as many of those questions as you could, and we will get those all over to you to be able to respond. So, thanks again. Great presentation. Really appreciate it. Okay, and before we wrap up, we have one more piece of business. It's the Amazon gift card prize drawing, and the winner of that gift card today is Brandon Omajan from Michigan. So congratulations to Brandon. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Veeam for making this event possible, and I want to thank all of you for attending and for your great questions. That concludes today's event. Have a fantastic rest of your day and a great weekend.